Chapter 10. Full Moon. A few days after finishing the carrots, Sam found himself with pruners in his hand, climbing over limbs higher and higher into the air. He had heard the Cunninghams were hosting guests this evening, and Mrs. Caroline, the lady of the house, had insisted on getting the trees trimmed before they arrived. He had spent the better part of a cloudless, humid day thinning out the branches of a pair of willows, two of the main features of the plantation. He would clip and prune a few branches and drop them to the ground, where his father would periodically come by and carry them to a burn pile past the main house a ways off. As usual, Sam hummed a melody as he worked. Near the end of the day, his father whistled up from the base of the tree to get Sam's attention. "Mr. Rabbit told me to tend the horses. You finish up here," his father called up. "See you at home." "See you at home," Sam called back down. Sam spent another good half hour trimming before dropping his pruners into his trouser pocket and looking west. The limbs he stood upon shifted and swayed as the wind stirred. The evening would bring a cool winter's breeze. The sun stretched its last rays into the few long clouds above the horizon, its warmth touching Sam's face. As he climbed down, he left the final orange of the day tickling the top of the willow tree. When he was halfway down, he paused and watched yet another carriage pull up to the front door of the main house. The well-dressed visitors stepped out of the carriage and inside without even a glance to the trees he had spent the day trimming. Sam dropped down out of the willow and found himself in the cooling shade of early evening. The easy breeze rustled and stirred the recently trimmed branches above. He was gathering the last of the clippings under his arm when he heard a voice from behind him. "You missed one." Arabella smiled and held up a branch, then poked and tucked it into the bunch under Sam's arm. She was dressed even fancier than usual. "Well, thank you," Sam replied as he poked a few branches in himself. "I want you to come listen. I learned a new one." "A new one?" "Yes, a new song. You want to hear it? I want to play it for you before the rest of the stuffy guests arrive. Once they're here, I'll have to be on lady behavior." "I'm supposed to finish up here, bring these back to the burn pile behind the shed, then—" "Well, it's on the way, isn't it? You could just stop by the window for a quick listen." Sam looked at the growing bundle under his arm, then at Arabella. He remembered the look Arabella's father had given him at the window. "I should be on my way home, miss," Sam replied. "Look, my dress is perfectly clean. There won't be any trouble this time," Arabella assured him. "You're going to walk by the window anyway. Just stop for a moment. Please?" Sam shrugged. "Just don't lean on the window," he thought. Arabella ran ahead and into the music room, poked her head out of the window, and waited for Sam. With the last willow branches and clippings gathered, he reluctantly walked toward the house. "Ooh, look!" Arabella squealed, as a few blue fireflies rose from the lawn and started an early... "Ooh, look!" Arabella squealed, as a few blue fireflies rose from the lawn and started an early dance into the air around the approaching Sam. Sam was careful to stand just outside the window, happy to have his arms filled with willow trimmings so he wouldn't lean on the windowsill. A minute later, Arabella finished a simple, square version of Amazing Grace. She looked out the window to Sam. "No wrong notes," Arabella announced proudly. "I've been practicing." "Yeah, sure," Sam trailed off, then considered out loud. "I sure heard it different in church, though." "Well, that's what the notes say." Arabella pointed to the loose sheet music placed on the piano. "The music?" Sam pondered, glancing at the papers filled with lines and dots. "I thought the music was the sounds." Arabella laughed. "Well, of course the music is the sounds, silly, but the paper it's like a book for the music, so it's like I was reading it." "A book for the music? Huh." Sam thought for a moment. "In church, they just play from how it sounds." "I played it just right. See?" Arabella took the pages of loose sheet music off the piano and was soon leaning out the window to show Sam. "See? These are all the notes that—" A long howl echoed from the surrounding woods. Sam's hair stood on end. "What was that?" Arabella said, eyes wide and searching the edge of the woods. A gust of wind pulled the pages up and out of her hand, sending them down the huge lawn and toward the willow tree. "Oh no!" Arabella cried. On instinct, Sam dropped the branches he was holding and chased the pages. Arabella tumbled out of the window and followed as fast as she could. The sheets scattered and tumbled across the lawn. Finally, Sam caught the first page under the willow tree and handed it to Arabella. He took off again and caught a second and third just as they reached the edge of the forest. Arabella looked down and counted. 1, 2, 4. Oh no, I'm missing page 3. As if on cue, page 3 flew past them and into the darkening underbrush of the forest. Arabella leapt for the final sheet, but missed as it flitted further into the tangle of oaks, sycamore, and pine. Arabella led the chase all over again, while Sam followed behind, never to leave a job undone. With the sun down and night upon them, it only took an instant for Sam to lose sight of her. "Wait, miss," he called. "Miss Bella!" "I got it. I'm right over—" Her voice stopped short. Sam moved toward her voice, swatting and pushing through a thicket. He broke through to find her standing, frozen. "Miss?" Arabella wasn't moving. The last page of music dropped from her hand. Sam finally realized she was staring at something, and her eyes were filled with fear. He followed Arabella's stare, and felt his own fear rise up within. It was the wolf. Its lip rose to reveal a row of sharp teeth, and a low growl came from its belly. A foamy drool dripped from its mouth, even darker than the shadows cast by the rising moon. Its head was tall enough to look a man in the chest. Its piercing eyes shone in the moonlight. Sam kept his voice low. "Miss, you best be getting out of here," he instructed. Sam stepped slowly, his eyes only on the wolf as he put himself between the beast and Arabella. "Sam?" "You go on now." Arabella glanced at Sam for a split second, then back to the wolf. "Go on, slow," Sam added. Gingerly, she stepped back, 1 foot, another, inching away. Her foot landed on the fallen page of music. Crunch. The wolf lunged with its mouth wide. Sam jumped and jammed his forearm between the beast's teeth. The wolf's fangs sank deep as it thrashed back and forth, shredding Sam's arm. Sam could feel the heat of the wolf's foamy drool as it seeped into his arm. With a powerful flick of its head, the wolf launched Sam into the air, slamming him into a tree and knocking the wind out of him before he crashed to the ground. "No!" Arabella cried. The wolf turned back to Arabella, licking Sam's blood from its snout. Sam gasped for air. He looked down at his arm and saw the white of bone through the gnawed flesh. Arabella screamed. The wolf was closing in. Finally catching his breath, Sam reached into his pocket and grabbed his pruners before scrambling back toward Arabella. With the wolf trained on her, Sam only had an instant to charge the beast with his last bit of strength. He lunged. The wolf snapped its head and closed its powerful jaws on Sam's thigh. He was thrashed back and forth, the wolf's teeth cutting and sinking deeper and deeper into his leg. Screams filled the forest. Sam and the wolf crashed to the ground, but the wolf wouldn't let go. Sam raised the pruners and brought them down as hard as he could, jabbing the beast straight in the eye. He twisted and pushed as hard as he could. A yelp escaped the wolf's throat, and its legs gave way as it slumped to the ground. Arabella was on her knees and at Sam's side in a flash. She reached down and pried the jaws from Sam's leg. His blood flowed out and onto her hands. She bunched the edge of her dress and pressed the fabric to Sam's wound the best she could. Sam grimaced against the pain. "You're bleeding. There's so much." Sam's eyes fluttered. The bushes shifted behind her, and Arabella snapped her head toward the sound. Her father broke through the underbrush, with her brother Seamus close behind. "Girl, what are you screaming?" Abbott's eyes widened as he took in the scene. "What in the—" The blood-stained dress of his daughter filled him with fear as he rushed to her side. "What's he done to you? What has he done?" her father yelled as he pulled her up and away from Sam and the wolf. "It's not my blood, Pa, it's his. It chewed him up. Her father looked at Sam and the wolf, then inspected his daughter. "What are you doing out here with him? You shouldn't be out here at all." Arabella stood up. "Pa, we have to—" Abbott roughly pulled Arabella by the arm. He glanced over his shoulder at the wounded and dying Sam. "Serves him right from being out here with you. Who knows what could have happened?" Arabella struggled against her father, but there was no way she could overpower him. Pa, we can't." "Leave him be." No, Arabella cried. But it was no use. Her father yanked her away. Her brother turned back and bent low to look Sam in the eye. "Serves you right for trying to get with my sister," he hissed. You're gonna die. Alone. Sam's vision went blurry, and everything went black. Tears streamed down Arabella's face as Abbott dragged her across the lawn and up the stairs of the front porch. "We can't just," she cried as she finally broke free. "I've heard enough." Abbott grabbed her again. "That's enough out of you. What's done is done. If there was one of those beasts out there, there's bound to be more, and we're not risking our lives for a... Maybe he's still alive. That's the end of it," Abbott yelled. Caroline eased the front door open and stepped onto the porch. "Abbott, my dear, what's all the fuss about? We have guests." "Get her cleaned up," Abbott barked, "and send her to bed for giving so much lip." Caroline swept up Arabella as the guests filtered out of the house, gasping and whispering at her bloodied appearance. In the forest, Sam regained consciousness for a brief moment. He blinked his eyes open and touched his leg. It felt sticky. He could smell pine. Through blurry vision, he saw a huge black figure pulling the wolf away from him. The figure flopped the wolf on its back, then looked up, just as Sam's eyes fluttered into the back of his head. Sam heard soft chanting as darkness surrounded him, and he passed out again. Arabella hugged her knees in the bathtub while her mother poured water down her back, offering words that should have been soothing, but weren't. "It'll be okay, don't you worry. Your pa's just looking out for you." Arabella stepped out of the tub in silence as her mother dried her off. Caroline slipped the nightgown over her daughter's head, laid her down in bed, gave her a kiss, and gently closed the door behind her. The moon shone through the window as the breeze pushed the bedroom curtains into her room. Arabella looked down to her hand, where a red stain streaked across her palm. A silver beam set her face aglow in the lonely darkness. Her eyes were wide open and full of tears. In the days leading up to the full moon, the wolf had been circling the plantation, unseen by anyone except John and the raven. For the first time in almost 2 weeks, John sensed the wolf had found its mark. This must be the place, John thought. Best get ready. He spent the next couple days getting the lay of the land. He watched the large yellow house from the woods, seeing workers and the owners of the plantation go about their daily lives. One of those lives was about to change. John's own change was coming too, as it had every month for centuries. He would need a place unseen by human eyes and unheard by human ears. The woods were always the perfect hiding place. Trees muffled sound and kept sight lines short. In the night, the darkness beneath the canopy was so complete and shadows so deep, an entire beast could hide within them. John set up camp in the forest nearby along some tall, friendly pines. He dug 2 small holes next to each other to make a hidden, smokeless Dakota fire. A stream close by made for easy water. On the night of the full moon, as Sam was climbing down from the willow tree and the last of the Cunninghams' guests were arriving, John was at his camp. He reached into his pelt satchel and pulled out the jar of tea Constance had given him. It had been steeping since he left Forge. No doubt it would be potent. He held it up against the golden glow of the sky, watching the swirling herbs and other mysterious ingredients. Constance would never actually tell him what was in it. He just hoped she added some maple syrup. He pulled the lid off and immediately smelled valerian and skullcap. He did not smell maple syrup. Damn it, he thought. He took a deep breath and downed the whole thing in one gulp. Making a face, he remembered Soup's cookies and shoved one in his mouth as quickly as he could. After a few breaths, he began feeling the calming effects of Constance's powerful concoction. Thinking ahead, John shed his clothes and put them in a neat pile, revealing a muted scar running from his upper arm to his neck. It started to tingle. John braced himself. Constance's magic would help with the suffering, but not the pain. At the first glimpse of the moon, his scar itched and burned. Hair rose fast from the rugged skin. The muscle under the scar pulled and stretched, and John felt his bones softening and hardening as they elongated and rebuilt themselves. The ligaments and tendons groaned inside from the tension. His heart pounded in his chest as it enlarged chamber by chamber. Agony pierced his mind as the structure of his skull extended into a snout. His eyes rolled back, and memories flashed through his mind, regret after painful regret, experiences he wished he could go back and change. His ears rose high on his head. His teeth bled as they shifted forward, his canines lengthening. It only took the moon 7 minutes to rise, but in that time John's body completely changed. With it, his mind had experienced lifetimes of pain, anguish, and grief. It was the price he paid for the power he held. He stood tall and wrapped his pelt around his waist. He was as much beast as man. Instinctively, he filled his lungs with air and howled. He was ready. Several hundred yards away, the wolf growled, and John's keen ears made him turn his head. John's huge strides closed the distance quickly. He watched through the trees as Arabella chased her fluttering sheet music unknowingly to the waiting wolf. An unseen witness, John patiently remained in the shadows as Sam bravely saved Arabella and impressively managed to subdue the wolf with the small blade of his pruners. It was imperative that John hold himself back. He knew once the wolf had found its mark, there was nothing that could change it. The wolf and Arthur had made the choice, and that choice was Sam. John also didn't intervene when Arabella was dragged away by her father. Now he didn't need to navigate around the girl, and even better, they assumed they had left Sam for dead. If John didn't act quickly, they would be right. He finally stepped out of the shadows and pulled the wolf away. In one motion, he threw Sam over his shoulder, grabbed one leg of the wolf, and started to walk. His night was just beginning. Letha's spell had worked. When he came upon his small camp, he carefully laid Sam and the wolf in the shadows. He pulled out his journal and opened to a dog-eared page to refresh his memory. Trading the journal for an axe, he began to chant as he made the first cut through the belly of the wolf. This coat now thy spirit holds, soul released and body unfolds. Release your shield and shed your skin, a curing force held within. The process of the transference was already underway, and John made quick work of skinning the wolf. Every so often, he would hear a groan and look over to see Sam struggling to make it through his dreams. Sam looked like he was both trying to wake up and stay asleep at the same time, a common occurrence for this first night. John knew the dreams were vivid and strange. After the bite comes a state of shock, naturally followed by a blackout that leads to a strange space between awake and sleep. The whole body is immobilized while it recovers through a series of fever-induced dreams lasting at least several hours and often days. This was the initial integration. Inside Sam, the blood from the wolf's bite, the very same blood Letha had pulled from Arthur on the new moon 2 weeks ago, was beginning to pulse. It was finding a way to integrate. Like all transformations, it was painful. With John's skill and extra strength from his own transformation, his axe blade cut quickly into the skin of the wolf as he sliced and pulled it away. Each pass of his axe gently shaved the fascia from the muscle and left the wolf's body naked and pink in the moonlight. Steam rose from the exposed flesh. Once he passed the spine, John flipped the wolf onto its other side. It was a bloody job, but it needed to be finished, and soon. Getting the wolf skin off the wolf and onto Sam would not only ensure a good bond, but also help tremendously in the healing of Sam's wounds. In fact, the hide might be the only thing that could keep Sam alive. Healing was the most potent of the pelt's magic, and, truth be told, the secret to Arthur's long life, and John's too. John's satchel pelt unfolded so its fur side was out, and it crawled along the ground and up to John's back to witness the last few cuts. The pelts didn't have eyes, but they seemed to see everything, and know all that was going on around them. Like a lot of magic John had experienced over the years, he wasn't quite sure how it all worked. He just knew that it did. John made the final slice, drew the pelt off the wolf, and flopped it onto Sam. He then pulled, tucked, and wrapped the wolf's pelt all around Sam's wounded body. It settled and clung to Sam, the fascia underneath the fur melding with Sam's own skin, embracing its new partner. John dragged the wolf's body into a circle of moonlight. As the cold blue beams struck the skinned carcass, smoky wisps rose and swirled from the glazed pink flesh and dove down into the pelt. The bonding and healing had begun. John's own pelt slithered on the ground back and forth as if it was pacing, a strange witness to the whole process. Butchering the fresh kill had covered John in blood. He was quite a mess. He purposefully perked his ears and smelled the air. Not sensing any danger, he made his way to the stream nearby to wash the blood away. Even though John had tucked it in, Sam's wolf pelt continued to move on its own. It shifted and slithered up and down Sam's body, searching out what needed to be healed the most. It squeezed around his mangled arm and shredded leg, sliding over and winding around them tightly. With the rest of his body released from the pelt's gentle squeeze, Sam twitched himself awake. He opened his eyes to a moon so full and bright that it cast shadows on the forest floor. On the ground next to him lay the pale and thin body of the wolf. A gray mist rose and whirled toward him, as if the beams from the moon were evaporating the body before his eyes. He struggled to his feet, and after another look, realized the wolf had been completely skinned. The muscle and sinew glistened pink and shiny in the moonlight, yet the body was evaporating with a subtle hiss before his eyes. As the last of the mist enveloped him, the naked carcass dissolved into the ground, becoming indistinguishable from the dirt. Sam blinked. Dizzy from the effort of simply standing, he braced himself against the trunk of a tree. A squishing sound caught Sam's attention, and he looked down to see it was coming from where the thick, dark pelt was clinging to his arm and leg. Sam shuddered, then scratched and pulled to get it off. While the pelt held firm to his leg, he managed to free his arm. In the moonlight, he could see that somehow the skin had closed and there was no longer bone showing. Even more strange, it didn't hurt to move. With the pelt still squishy and clinging onto his leg, he pushed off the tree and realized he could actually walk with some limping and a great effort. He caught movement out of the corner of his eye, and his ears tracked a scurrying that trailed away through the bushes. He managed to whisper, "Help!" No one answered. He gathered as much strength as he could and tried again, breathlessly, "Help!" From her bed, Arabella sat up into the moonlight. Did she hear something? She turned her head sideways to listen, then slid out of bed and tiptoed to the open window. John stopped washing his hands in the stream nearby and stood, cocking his head to listen over the gurgle of the water. His own pelt, a strange eyeless pet, broke through the underbrush and beckoned him. Sam hobbled forward with less pain than he expected. He pushed himself through the woods toward the main house as the pelt squeezed his leg. "Arabella?" he whispered. "It's too bad. I was looking forward to hearing her play," gossiped a lady with a tall hat as she fanned herself. "Abbott had no choice. She was very disrespectful," replied another in a canary-yellow dress. Above the music room, Arabella stood at her window and squinted into the night over the great lawn. Something stirred the shrubs. Was it the wind? Or was there something moving along the border of the tree line? Something in the shadows? From the darkness, just where the lawn met the woods, Sam appeared. He limped forward. "Sam!" gasped Arabella under her breath. She bolted out of her room, down the stairs, and straight out the front door, running barefoot across the lawn as fast as she could. Her nightgown trailed behind her like a ghost. In the music room, the lady with the tall hat caught a glimpse of the moon now high over the trees. She gestured and remarked to her friend, My, look at that moon tonight." She squinted out the window, a gossamer figure catching her attention. She turned to her host. "I say, Abbott, is that Arabella?" Water still dripping from his hands, John arrived at his campsite to find Sam was gone. Before John had a chance to panic, the raven swooped low and gave a loud caw as it flew toward the Cunninghams' plantation. Sam was limping fast across the lawn as Arabella rushed to him under the willow tree. Sam could barely hold himself up as she hugged him tight. "Sam! Oh, we need to—" Blam! A gunshot rang through the night air, freezing both of them. John snapped his head toward the sound. "Get back here, girl!" Abbott called as he reloaded the gun, "so I can get a clear shot." Other men from the evening's guest list began to gather behind him. "Pa, it's Sam!" Arabella looked down at Sam's arm, then at the strange fur skin that was wrapped around his leg. "He needs a doctor." "Get away!" Abbott yelled. "Pa, don't!" she cried, but before she could finish, her father fired another gunshot in the air. Blam! Sam didn't have any choice. He pushed Arabella away and ran as fast as he could back toward the woods. His injured leg sent shocks through his body with every stride. "Seamus, get the dogs!" ordered Abbott. "Torches, too!" He turned to his guests with a smile. "Gentlemen, if you're in a hunting mood, there's a few more guns inside." Sam sprinted from the lawn into the forest as Abbott's men stepped onto the porch armed with an assortment of pistols and rifles. Abbott kept the only shotgun for himself. Seamus released the dogs from their chains and their barking announced the chase was on. Arabella fell to her knees, her heart broken. The dogs dashed past her toward the woods. Her father, brother, and the other men followed close behind, rushing past her as she looked at the sky and pleaded, her tears glistening in the moonlight like dew. "Pa, no!" she cried. Sam's breath echoed in his ears as he ran. Adrenaline took over, deadening Sam's pain as he picked up speed. He ran into the woods so fast he didn't notice the shadow of John's beast standing by the same trees Sam had been slammed into hours before. As the dogs entered the underbrush, Sam had no choice but to push deeper into the forest and the night.